We continue learning Dirshu Mishnah Berurah Hilchais Tefillah Siman Tzadi Daled, learning the correct direction one is supposed to daven towards. We pick it up with Sif Gimel, which the Mechaber teaches us. We learned all about supposed to daven east. If you're in Chutz La'aretz, if you're in Eretz Yisrael, Mechavin towards Kodesh Kodashim. If Lavush said the shul should be a little bit southeastern, says the Mechaber, what if you can't? And of course, it's very important because there are times, perhaps one doesn't know where he is, etc. And you have to daven, you're yechavin, your heart to your Father in heaven. Says Mishnah Berurah, you're riding on a donkey, you don't have to get off the daven, even if someone that's holding it. You're allowed to daven while you're going. And similarly, you're on a wagon or a boat. If you can stand. If not, you'll have to sit where you're sitting and daven. If you're walking, you're allowed to keep on walking and daven even though you're not facing Yerushalayim. It's not a sakana. But if you stop, what's going to happen? It's going to be difficult. The delay in your journey, and your heart's going to be tired. You're not going to have intent. And from here, we're seeing an incredible halacha. At the first and foremost concern by tefillah is kavana. So you might think, I should stop. But if you're going to stop, and by stopping, you're going to be all tired, all nervous, you don't know, don't stop. And rather, continue and daven. Subjective to the person, to the place, to the situation, and everyone has to know themselves. Continues the mechaber. Someone to stand by avos for the frame. It's better if it's not a sakana. So first of all, let's before you even see the Mishnah Berurah, we don't usually see Ber Halacha. But there's a small Ber Halacha over here in Sif Gimel about if you don't know which way to daven. He says near the Taish, he said they put on the tzad echad mitzvah. You should face one way. You it's better to go to the east. And if not to the west, and there he quotes the Shulchan Shleimah. So basically, one should try as best as possible to at least turn a little bit if he can. We go to the Mishnah Berurah Sif Daled about davening on the road. Derech Yilucham. They should kasha love ikav aderech again, because stopping is going to be difficult to him. And his das is not going to be calm if he stops, and therefore you should daven while traveling. What does that mean? Don't sit, stand. You'll have to continue on the journey. If you're able to turn your face at least, you should. If you're there early, and you're waiting for the caravan, and someone could wait and hold your donkey for you, then if you're waiting anyways, of course, go down and daven. If you're going in your legs, you should stop. You're not going to be so bothered. Either way, you're waiting for other people and you're traveling by foot, then of course get up and stand and daven. You should try to stand by avos. The kavana, the intent, the basic pirush hamilos. The translation of the words is liikuva. Without it, you're not yoytei shmona esrei. And of course, we know it's not that the translation is difficult. We just have to actually turn on our brain. Come on, Siman Kov Aleph. If you're walking, you can't have so much kavana. You should wait until the end of the brach of avos. You don't have to go off the animal, but at least you shouldn't travel until you finish the bracha of avos. Says the Mechaber Sif, hey, you're sitting on a boat or a wagon. If you could stand when you bow, you should. So you're bowing, standing. But you say so you should take the 3 steps. Says the Ramah, you take 3 steps even if you are sitting. But if you're able to stand up, that is better, so you could bow, take the steps properly. You're riding on an animal. You should turn the animal 3 steps backwards, as if you did it yourself, and that would be similar to someone in a wheelchair. If he can't move his legs, but he can move his whole body in the wheelchair backwards and then forwards. Says Mishnah Berurah, maybe Usa because of he's scared. Maybe it's better to sit if you're scared. Kamash Malon. That's better to stand if it's possible. And I guess this would be most common on an airplane. Often, to stand up is not so feasible. It causes fights, the stewardesses and whatnot. So you sit, you dive in your seat. So number 1, we're learning, you bow, you take the 3 steps even when you're sitting. But number 2, we're learning, is if possible, you should stand up and then bow. But of course, one has to be mindful of all the other halachas that we learned. Often by standing up, if you're going to have erva in front of you, you can have uncovered hair, people dressed inappropriately, that would be an issue as well. Whereas when you're sitting, you have the seat in front of you, that would be a good barrier. But we continue, so if continue your task, you should be yachzer behema for the 3 steps. So yachzer atzma lachayr yourself, al gabi behema, you move yourself back on the behema. The way you would do it, the way that you're trying to leave a king, and that's really what the 3 steps are, and that's why it's so important that even if you can't move, the whole purpose is that you're taking 3 steps away from the king, 3 steps closer to the king, so do as much as you can. We continue with Sivav, we're going to take Sivav and Zayin together. Even lying on his side, if he could have in mind, if it's impossible, you should think that tefillah in his heart. Says Siv Zayin, he's worried it might mess up his tefillah, or they're going to steal something from him. You should sit in his place and daven. Again, honing in on this critical ingredient that you need your das to be miyusheves. And if your mind is not going to be set, you're not able to daven. Sit and daven and bow. We continue with the Mishnah Berurah, Sivkatan Chaf on Sivav, how a chayla is mispalel. An elderly person that cannot stand, the Yishev Mitzvah should sit and daven. If he can stand when he bows, that is better. And if not, if the chayla cannot even articulate the words, what should he do? He should be Yahara Beliba, he should think them in his heart. It says Mishnah Berurah, it could be that with cure, with thought, you're yotzei tefillah b'diavad. Ve'in tzarich lachzol espala afilu mevri b'zman hatefillah. Doesn't have to daven again, even if he gets better. Me'achar sha'anasu ha'ita. When he davened, he was an oines. Ayin pri chadash b'megadim. Ayin le'al seven samach beis. If dal Mishnah Berurah be'erlach Hashem. Ve'mini yach lechavi in daita kari kriyishma levada. If you can't have any kavani, just say shema im efshalei. If you could. What's the ikr kavanah of Kriyishma? By the first pasuk, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, Elisei Klal Yisrael, Hashem is our God, Hashem is one. That kavanah is easier, and therefore a chayil should try to do at least that. Sivkat Chav Bei Shaloi Lismach. Hatam Tefillah Tzrich Lamida, you have to stand up. Come on, Sim Sadichas. V'Amida Shaydei Smicha Lo Chashvin Amida. And if you're standing via leaning, we didn't receive the Mechaber yet. Says the Mechaber in Sivchas, and with this we conclude. You should not lean on yourself or on your friends while you're davening. Now let's see the Mishnah Berurah again. Why not? Hatam says Mishnah Berurah, you know what the reason is? Because for tefillah you need to be standing, and by leaning you're not called standing. Leaning a little bit, which is that so what's called leaning? To lean a little bit on the table on the stender, that if they pull away the table and the stender, you will not fall, that's allowed. But if by pulling away the stender or the table, you're leaning so much that you're going to fall, that is not allowed. Some explain the reason. Has to be with fear. Any form of leaning is forbidden. You can be made to lean a little bit. So we're seeing it's really not to lean at all. As we're seeing, that's going to be a machlokes. If one needs relevant or Shani Yom Kippur, you're allowed to lean a little bit. As we said, anytime you have to stand, you should not be leaning. We conclude with it gets better, is able to have kavanah by leaning. Yas Hakein, he should do that. V'im lav yispalel miyushav, and if not, the chayla is able to daven sitting down. And let's just see one dirshu over here, note number 10. We mentioned an airplane. Dirshu goes a little more, we'll call it old school. They mention an autobus. L'spalel b'shas nesia ba'autobus. Says Rav Elyashiv that if you're within this city, get off the bus. What's the reason? Because you easily can find another bus. But if you're traveling intercity, and then you're going to be worried, like we just said, tidra zaita, you're not going to have kavana, then you're allowed to daven even on the bus. What about on the train? Says Dirshu Mishnah Berurah, also l'naig b'choloifen l'spal b'shas hanesiya. Why? Shkein hareichav l'chamar yechamar hilich ba'atzmai. Says Dirshu Mishnah, an important nekuda. The chamar goes by itself, but by a car, where you have to do a maisa nehiga, you have to help, you have to drive the car, then you're not able to daven. As well, he adds on his pikuach nefesh. And again, whether that is a subjective point or not, we're going to leave at that. And b'siyata d'shmaya, we'll pick it up from Sif Tes in the next shiur.